A rich CEO had everything, but one night, he saw 3 homeless boys. And his life changed forever. One night, the CEO was driving home from his office. The day had been full of endless meetings, contracts, numbers, and pressure. His company was at the top of the market. His office was on the tallest floor of the city's shining tower. He had cars that people admired, a penthouse apartment that looked like a palace, and a bank account that never stopped growing. But despite having everything, he always felt something was missing. Whenever he returned to his empty apartment, silence greeted him, no laughter, no voices, no family waiting, just quiet walls and the echo of his own footsteps. For years he had buried that emptiness under work, success and money. But deep inside, he knew his life was lonely. That night, while driving through the bright streets, something caught his eye. On the side of the road, under a dim streetlight, 3 small boys were huddled together. Their clothes were dirty and torn. One of them was lying on a piece of cardboard with a thin, worn-out blanket. Another boy was digging into an old box, searching for leftover food. The youngest one was just staring at the sky, as if hoping the stars would answer his hunger. The CEO slowed his car. His heart beat faster. He had seen poverty before, in newspapers, on TV screens, in reports, but never this close. Not like this. These weren't just statistics, they were real children. Cold, hungry, alone. He rolled down his window and stared. The boys noticed his expensive car and froze for a moment. Then, thinking he might yell at them to move, they quickly looked away. But the CEO couldn't take his eyes off them. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. A feeling he had long forgotten. He drove home. But the image of those boys wouldn't leave his mind. That night he tossed and turned in his bed. The luxury mattress felt harder than stone. He closed his eyes, but all he could see was the boy with the empty eyes staring at the sky. For the first time, he asked himself questions he had never dared to ask. Why am I so alone? What is the meaning of all this success? If I can't help anyone, what's the point of my wealth? The next morning, he went to his office as usual. Huge screens showed profit numbers and stock growth. His managers talked about millions in revenue. But he wasn't listening. His mind was still on those 3 children. Their faces haunted him more than any financial problem ever had. Finally, he called his secretary and asked, "Do you know if there's any place in this city where homeless kids are taken care of? Any shelter, any organization?" She was surprised. The CEO never asked such questions. Usually, he only cared about business, not about strangers. But she nodded and said she would find out. The whole day passed slowly. He felt restless, disconnected from the world of business that once defined him. That night, he did something unusual. Instead of going straight home, he turned his car back onto the same road where he had seen the boys. His heart raced as he approached the streetlight. And there they were. The same 3 boys. Still sitting in the cold. Still waiting for a miracle that never came. This time, he pulled his car over and stepped out. The boys looked nervous. Maybe they thought he was a policeman, or someone who would chase them away. The CEO smiled gently and said, "Have you eaten anything today?" The boys exchanged quick glances. The oldest one shook his head. The youngest looked down, embarrassed. The CEO's heart tightened. He opened the car door and said, "Come on. Let's get something to eat." At first, the boys hesitated. They weren't used to kindness. But slowly, they followed him. He took them to a small restaurant nearby. The waiter stared at the dirty children, and then looked at the CEO in confusion. But the CEO waved it off and ordered food. The boys began eating like they hadn't eaten in days. Every bite was devoured with hunger. They didn't even speak, they just ate. The CEO sat quietly, watching them, and for the first time in many years, he felt something new: peace. It wasn't the peace that came from money or success. It was the peace of seeing someone's life change, even for a single night. When the plates were empty, he leaned forward and asked, "Where do you live?" The oldest boy whispered, "Nowhere. Sometimes the train station. Sometimes the street. Sometimes nowhere at all." The CEO swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. These were just kids, and yet, they had no home, no parents, no safety. For a man who owned everything, it was the most painful truth he had ever heard. That night, he didn't just return home with an empty heart. He returned with a decision. A decision that his life would never be the same again. The three homeless boys had walked into his world. And unknowingly, they had opened a door inside him that money had never been able to touch. And with that, the journey began. The next morning, the CEO woke up earlier than usual. Normally, his mornings started with emails, business calls, and coffee served in a designer cup. But today, the first thing on his mind wasn't his company. It was those three boys. Their faces, their hunger, their eyes, they followed him even into his dreams. He got dressed. But instead of putting on his sharp business suit, he chose something simple. A plain shirt. A jacket. Something that wouldn't scare the children, or make them feel out of place. He looked at himself in the mirror, and realized it was the first time in years he had dressed not for status, not for meetings, but for a purpose. When he arrived at the office, he couldn't focus on work. His managers came in with reports and charts, but he waved them off. "Handle it yourselves today," he said. "I have another matter to deal with." They exchanged puzzled looks. The CEO never skipped work. For him to step away meant something extraordinary was happening. That afternoon, he drove again to the street where he had found the boys. His heart was racing. What if they weren't there? What if he never saw them again? He slowed down as he reached the corner. And there they were. The same three boys, huddled in the same spot, looking tired, cold, and lost. He parked his car and walked toward them. This time, the boys recognized him. Their eyes widened. And for the first time, there was a tiny spark of hope in their faces. "Hey," the CEO said gently. "Remember me?" The youngest boy nodded. The oldest one stood up, cautious but curious. "I thought," the CEO continued, "maybe you'd like to eat again today." The boys didn't answer. But their silence spoke louder than words. They followed him. He took them back to the same restaurant. The waiter looked at them strangely again. But the CEO didn't care. He ordered food, more than enough for all three. The boys ate hungrily, just like before. As he watched them, he asked, "What are your names?" The oldest boy swallowed his food and said quietly, "I'm Daniel." The second one, smaller and thin, said, "I'm Jacob." The youngest, barely 7 years old, whispered, "And I'm Sam." Daniel, Jacob, Sam. Their names sank deep into the CEO's heart. They were no longer just three homeless boys. They were children with identities, with lives, with stories waiting to be told. He leaned closer and asked softly, "Where are your parents?" Daniel's face hardened. Jacob looked down at his plate. Sam hugged himself, as if the question had touched something too painful. Finally, Daniel spoke. "They're gone." The CEO felt his chest tighten. He didn't ask how or why. Not yet. The pain in Daniel's voice told him enough. For a moment, silence filled the table. The CEO felt the weight of their loss, a weight no child should ever have to carry. He thought of his own life. The luxury. The comfort, the endless resources. And then he thought of these three boys who had nothing. When they finished eating, he surprised himself with the words that came out of his mouth. "Listen, I don't want to see you sleeping on the street again. Tonight. You'll stay somewhere safe. Come with me." The boys froze. Daniel's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Jacob looked at him nervously. Sam, too young to understand everything, simply held Daniel's arm. "I know you don't trust me yet," the CEO said. "But I promise. I won't hurt you. I just want to help." Daniel studied him carefully. Life on the streets had made him cautious, always expecting danger. But there was something in the CEO's voice. Something steady, something true. After a long pause, Daniel finally nodded. The CEO led them to his car. As they sat inside, Sam's eyes grew wide at the leather seats, the shining dashboard, the smell of luxury. Jacob touched the window button and gasped when it rolled down automatically. For them, it was like entering another world. The CEO drove them not to his penthouse. He knew that might overwhelm them. But to a modest hotel nearby. He booked a clean, comfortable room for the boys. The receptionist looked surprised, but the CEO ignored it. He bought them new clothes from the store next door. Shirts, pants, shoes, even small jackets. When he handed the clothes to them, Sam's little eyes lit up. "Are these really for us?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes," the CEO said with a smile. "They're yours now." The boys disappeared into the bathroom one by one. And when they came out in their new clothes, The CEO felt a wave of emotion he couldn't explain. They looked different. Still thin, still tired, but no longer invisible. They looked like children who belonged to the world. That night he tucked them into the hotel beds. Sam, the youngest, clutched the blanket tightly and whispered, "Thank you." The CEO froze. It had been so long since anyone had thanked him with real sincerity. Not for money, not for business. Not for favors. But for something that mattered. His throat tightened, and he quickly turned away so the boys wouldn't see the emotion in his eyes. When he left the hotel, he walked to his car slowly, his mind full of thoughts. For years he had measured success in profits and power. But tonight, for the first time, he felt he had truly done something meaningful. As he drove back to his lonely penthouse, he realized something. His life, once empty and silent, was beginning to change. Not because of money. Not because of power. But because of 3 boys who had nothing. And had given him something he never thought he'd find again: purpose. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, the CEO couldn't shake the feeling he had left behind at the hotel. Usually, he dreaded mornings. He woke to a cold apartment, checked his emails before brushing his teeth, and drowned himself in the noise of business. But today, the thought of the 3 boys in clean clothes, finally sleeping in warm beds, brought him an unusual sense of peace. As he poured his coffee, he caught himself smiling. Something rare for him. He didn't just want to go to the office today. He wanted to see the boys again. He finished his coffee quickly and drove straight to the hotel. When he opened the door to their room, he froze for a moment. Sam, the youngest, was still asleep, curled up in the blanket. Jacob was sitting on the floor, carefully tying his new shoes as if they were treasures. Daniel, the oldest, was staring out the window. His expression hard but thoughtful. When they saw him, Jacob's face lit up. Sam woke up soon after and immediately smiled. Only Daniel kept his guard, though his eyes softened slightly. "Morning," the CEO said, carrying a bag. "I brought breakfast." The boys' faces brightened when he opened the bag. Warm pancakes, scrambled eggs, and fresh orange juice. They ate quickly, almost too quickly, as if afraid the food might vanish. Watching them, the CEO realized again just how harsh their lives had been. After breakfast, he leaned back in the chair. "I want to understand you better," he said gently. "Can you tell me how you ended up on the streets?" The boys exchanged glances. Jacob looked at Daniel, waiting for him to decide. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Our parents died 2 years ago," he said flatly. His voice carried no tears. Just the heavy tone of someone who had been forced to grow up too soon. "We had no family who wanted us. So we stayed together. That's all we had. Each other." The CEO's heart sank. He wanted to reach out, to tell Daniel he didn't have to carry the world on his small shoulders. But he stayed silent, letting the boy speak. "We tried shelters," Daniel continued, "but they were full. Sometimes people kicked us out. Sometimes," he stopped, his jaw tightening. "Sometimes people weren't nice." The CEO understood. He didn't need every detail to imagine the cruelty these children had faced. He clenched his fists under the table, anger rising at a world that allowed kids like these to suffer. "I'm sorry," the CEO said quietly. "No one should have to go through that. Especially not kids." For the first time, Daniel looked him in the eyes. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." The CEO paused. The question cut deep because he wasn't sure he had the answer yet. He thought for a moment and then said, "Because when I saw you 3, I realized I've spent my life building walls around myself. Money, business, power. None of it made me happy. But helping you, it feels like I've finally found something real. Maybe you were meant to cross my path." Daniel didn't respond. But the suspicion in his eyes faded a little. Later that day, the CEO decided to take them shopping. Not at luxury malls. He didn't want to overwhelm them. But at a decent store with basics. The boys walked in nervously, glancing around as if they didn't belong. But the CEO encouraged them. "Pick what you like. Clothes, shoes, anything." Jacob gasped. "Anything." "Yes, anything." For the first time in a long time, he saw them smile like children, not survivors. Jacob ran his fingers across shirts, and laughed when Sam tried on a hat too big for his head. Daniel chose carefully, always putting his brothers first. The CEO noticed that. The way Daniel's eyes always checked on the younger two, making sure they were okay. When they left the store with bags full of clothes, the boys looked different. They didn't just look cleaner. They looked like they had regained a small piece of dignity. That evening, the CEO took them to a park. Jacob and Sam immediately ran to the swings, their laughter echoing across the empty playground. The CEO sat on the bench with Daniel. "You take care of them, don't you?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "They're all I have. If I don't protect them, no one will." The CEO studied him. Daniel was only 12 or 13. Yet he carried himself like an adult. His childhood had been stolen, and it broke the CEO's heart. "You've done well," the CEO said softly. "They're lucky to have you." Daniel looked at him, uncertain how to respond. No one had ever told him that before. As the sun set, the CEO drove them back to the hotel. Sam fell asleep in the back seat, his head resting on Jacob's shoulder. Daniel stared out the window, silent as always. When they reached the hotel, the CEO helped them inside and said, "I'll see you tomorrow. Get some rest." Before he left, Sam suddenly reached out and hugged him around the waist. The CEO froze, caught off guard. Slowly he placed his hand on the boy's back. Something cracked inside him. A barrier he had carried for years. He realized how long it had been since anyone had touched him with love. That night, as he returned to his apartment, he didn't feel the crushing loneliness that usually awaited him. Instead he felt warmth. Hope. A strange sense that his life, once empty, was beginning to fill. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time, the skyline didn't look cold. It looked alive. And deep inside, he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning. Tomorrow I'll do more." The next morning, the CEO woke up before his alarm. The sunlight streamed into his penthouse, but instead of the usual emptiness, there was a sense of urgency in his chest. He couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, Jacob and Sam. They weren't just three boys anymore. They had become part of his thoughts, his decisions, his very heartbeat. He skipped his usual routine. No early calls, no emails, no coffee on the balcony. Instead, he drove straight to the hotel where the boys were staying. When he knocked on the door, Jacob opened it, his small face lighting up. "You came back," the CEO smiled. "Of course I did. Did you sleep well?"
Yes!
Jacob said quickly. Sam peeked from behind him, rubbing his eyes. Still half asleep, Daniel, as always, stood in the background, guarded but observant. "I thought today we could do something different," the CEO said. "How about a real breakfast? Not just food in bags. Let's go out together." The boys hesitated, then agreed. He drove them to a family diner on the edge of the city, the kind of place with red booths, warm smells of bacon and toast, and waitresses who called everyone honey. The boys had never been in such a place before. Their wide eyes darted around the room, amazed at the simple comfort others took for granted. They ordered pancakes, eggs and orange juice. Sam giggled when the waitress gave him extra syrup. Jacob couldn't stop eating. Daniel ate slower, always watching his brothers first. The CEO noticed this every time. Daniel carried the weight of responsibility heavier than any child should. As they ate, the CEO asked gently, "Have you ever been to school?" Jacob shook his head. Sam whispered, "No." Daniel clenched his jaw. "We tried," Daniel said finally. "But without papers, without parents, no one wanted us there." The CEO's chest tightened. Education, safety, childhood, these boys had been denied all of it. Suddenly, the wealth he had spent on luxuries felt heavier than ever. When they finished breakfast, he drove them around the city. They passed playgrounds full of laughing children, schools with kids running across the yard, families walking together. Jacob pressed his face to the window, watching everything with wonder. Sam kept asking questions about every building they passed. Daniel stayed silent, but his eyes betrayed a longing he couldn't hide. Finally, the CEO parked at a quiet spot overlooking the river. He turned to them. "Listen, I want to help you. Not just food or clothes. I want to give you something permanent. A safe place. A chance to live like kids should." The boys froze. Sam tilted his head. "Like a home." The word hit the CEO like a stone to the heart. A home. Something so simple, yet something these boys had never known. "Yes," the CEO said softly. "A home." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Why?" The CEO looked at him seriously. Because I can, and because I want to. All my life, I thought success was about money, buildings, and power. But maybe real success is about this. About changing lives. About giving you three the chance you deserve. For a long moment, no one spoke. The boys weren't used to promises. They had heard too many false ones in their short lives. But the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. Back at his office later that day, the CEO did something that shocked his employees. Instead of reviewing profits, he called in his legal team. "I want to know what it takes to become a guardian," he said. "Or at least to secure housing and education for 3 children." His lawyers blinked, unsure if they had heard him right. "Sir, are you saying you want to take in children?" "Less," he replied firmly. 3 of them." Whispers spread through the office. The man who had once been known as ruthless, cold, and distant was now talking about becoming a guardian. Some thought he had lost his mind. Others admired him but didn't understand. The CEO didn't care what they thought. For the first time in years, he felt he was moving toward something real. That evening, he returned to the boys. They were sitting in the hotel room, uncertain if he would come back. When he walked in, Jacob jumped up with excitement. Sam grinned. Daniel tried to hide his relief, but the CEO noticed the flicker in his eyes. "I've started something," the CEO told them. "It might take time, but I'm working on getting you a permanent place to live. And not just that, I'll make sure you go to school." Sam gasped. "School? Really?" "Yes," the CEO said, smiling. "School." Jacob clapped his hands. Even Daniel, who always carried the heaviest doubts, couldn't hide the slight curve of a smile. That night, as the boys slept peacefully in the hotel beds, the CEO sat in a chair by the window, watching over them. He thought about his life before this. The empty dinners, the endless meetings, the hollow victories. And then he looked at the 3 boys, breathing softly in their sleep. He realized something he had never admitted to himself before. They had saved him as much as he had saved them. Because in their eyes, in their laughter, and even in their pain, he had found the one thing money could never buy. A reason to live. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would test him, change him, and redefine everything he thought he knew about life, love, and family. The following week was unlike any the CEO had ever lived. For the first time, he wasn't driven by profit charts or corporate goals. He was driven by 3 boys, Daniel, Jacob, and Sam. Every decision he made, every thought he carried, circled back to them. But the world around him didn't change as easily as he had. At his company headquarters, whispers had turned into conversations. Executives exchanged nervous looks whenever he walked by. In the past, their CEO had been a man of steel, cold, efficient, and merciless in business. Now, he was showing up late to meetings, cutting discussions short, and sometimes skipping them entirely to spend time with the children. One afternoon, during a board meeting, one of the directors finally spoke up. "Sir, forgive me, but there's a growing concern among us. We've noticed changes. You've been distracted. Is everything all right?" The CEO looked around the room. For years these were the only people he ever spoke to. His so-called family. But now, their eyes seemed foreign, like strangers who couldn't understand what was happening inside him. "I've made a decision," he said firmly. "I'm going to invest part of my resources into helping children who have nothing. Kids on the street. Kids without families. It's time this company stood for more than just money." The room went silent. Then the whispers began again, louder this time. Some faces showed shock, others, disapproval. "Sir," one of the older board members said cautiously, "our duty is to shareholders. Not charity cases." The CEO's jaw tightened. For a moment, the man everyone once knew resurfaced, the sharp, commanding leader who brooked no argument. "Our duty," he said coldly, "is to humanity. Shareholders may come and go, but the legacy we leave behind, that will last." The room fell silent again. The directors looked down at their papers, no one daring to push further. Later that evening, the CEO went to the hotel. The boys were waiting for him eagerly. Jacob ran to him the moment he entered. Sam tugged his sleeve, showing him a small toy car someone at the diner had given him. Daniel stayed at the back, his arms crossed as usual. The CEO noticed Daniel's expression. "Something wrong?" he asked. Daniel hesitated, then said, Why are you doing this? Really? The question cut deep. It wasn't the first time Daniel had doubted him, but this time, the tone was sharper. I told you, the CEO said. Because I want to help you. Daniel shook his head. People don't help for free. People don't care. They always want something back. So what do you want from us? The CEO froze. He looked at Daniel. A boy so young, yet carrying the scars of betrayal, abandonment, and broken trust. Daniel wasn't being rude. He was protecting his brothers. The CEO walked closer and knelt so his eyes met Daniel's. I don't want anything from you. Not money. Not favors. Nothing. What I want is simple: for you to have a future. For you to have the life you deserve. That's it. Daniel stared at him, searching for a crack. A hidden motive. For the first time, he saw nothing but truth. Still, he didn't let his guard down completely. You don't understand, Daniel whispered. The world doesn't work like that. People don't just save kids like us. The CEO's heart ached. He realized how many times life must have proven Daniel right. But he placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder anyway. Maybe the world doesn't. But I do. And I will. Even if it takes the rest of my life to prove it. Daniel didn't answer, but his silence was softer than before. Over the next few days, the CEO worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He met with lawyers, social workers, and city officials. Paperwork piled up, rules, regulations. Endless barriers stood in his way. Adoption wasn't simple. Guardianship wasn't simple. The system was designed with walls, not doors. But for the first time in years, the CEO felt alive, fighting for something. He wasn't negotiating business contracts anymore. He was negotiating for lives. At night, he continued visiting the boys. He'd take them to parks, diners, and once even a small movie theater. Jacob laughed so hard during the movie that strangers turned to smile at him. Sam fell asleep halfway through, curled against the CEO's arm. Daniel, though quiet, never let his brothers out of sight. One night, as they walked back to the hotel, Jacob tugged the CEO's hand. Are we really going to school? Like real school? Yes, the CEO promised. I'm working on it. Jacob's eyes sparkled. Then I want to be a doctor. To help people. Like you're helping us. The CEO felt his throat tighten. In Jacob's innocent words, he saw something powerful. The ripple effect of kindness. But not everyone was happy. The more time he spent with the boys, the louder the criticism grew. Business magazines wrote about his strange new obsession. Investors questioned his priorities. Even his assistant whispered, Sir, people are beginning to say you've changed, that you're softer. The CEO smiled faintly. Yes, he thought, I have changed. That night, as he tucked Sam into bed and turned off the hotel lights, he stood by the window for a long time. His city looked different now. Less like a jungle of glass and steel, more like a place full of souls waiting to be seen. And though he knew storms were coming, from his company, from society, maybe even from Daniel's lingering doubt, he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't turning back. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing meaning. And meaning, he realized, was worth everything. Next morning, the CEO woke up earlier than usual. For years, mornings meant black coffee, financial reports, and emails stacked higher than mountains. But now, mornings meant something different. They meant the boys. He drove straight to the hotel, a bag of breakfast sandwiches in his hand. When he walked in, Sam rushed to him first, his little arms wrapping around the CEO's leg. Jacob followed, grinning wide. Daniel, as always, stayed back, arms folded across his chest. You brought food. Jacob's eyes lit up. Of course, the CEO said with a smile. Nobody should start the day hungry. The boys tore into the food happily. Watching them eat felt more fulfilling than any boardroom victory he'd ever had. But the moment of peace didn't last long. His phone buzzed again and again. Urgent calls from his office. Finally, he stepped aside to answer. Sir, we need you here immediately. His assistant said. Her voice was tight with worry. The board is restless. Investors are demanding explanations. They're questioning your activities. My activities. He repeated. Yes, she said carefully. Spending time with street children. Canceling meetings. Talking about charity. They think it's distracting you from your responsibilities. Some are even suggesting you step down if this continues. The CEO froze. Step down. The company he built, the empire he created, suddenly threatened to be taken from him. For a moment, fear clawed at him. His entire life had been built around control, power, and success. Losing it all would have terrified him before. But now, as he looked back at the three boys sitting on the bed, Sam giggling with a mouth full of sandwich, Jacob showing Daniel his toy car, Daniel quietly watching everything, a different thought entered his mind. What if losing it isn't the worst thing? What if the worst thing is not fighting for them? He hung up without answering. That afternoon he sat the boys down. Listen, he said gently. Things might get difficult for me at work. Some people don't understand why I'm helping you. But no matter what happens, I want you to know this: I'm not going anywhere. You're safe with me. Jacob nodded eagerly. Sam smiled and leaned against him. Daniel studied him with sharp eyes. Even if you lose everything? Daniel asked. The CEO held his gaze. Even then, for the first time, Daniel didn't look away. He didn't smile, not yet. But something in his expression softened. Like a wall with the first crack forming. That night, the CEO went home to his empty penthouse. But the silence that once drowned him no longer had the same power. Now he carried the laughter of the boys with him. Their voices echoed in his mind, filling the emptiness. Still doubt whispered. Could he really protect them? Could he fight against a world built on money, not mercy? The next day, the battle began. At the office, the board meeting was brutal. One investor slammed his hand on the table. We didn't put billions into this company so you could play father to 3 homeless kids.
This is a disgrace!
Another added, your reputation is at risk. Our stockholders are worried. If this continues, we'll have no choice but to remove you. The CEO leaned back in his chair. Years ago, he would have fought tooth and nail to defend his empire. But now, he simply said, then remove me. The room went silent. Shocked faces turned toward him. You don't mean that? One director whispered. I do, he replied calmly. Because for the first time in my life, I'm doing something worth losing everything for. He stood and walked out, leaving them speechless. Later that evening, he returned to the boys. They could see something heavy in his eyes. Jacob asked, did something bad happen at work? Less, the CEO admitted. But it doesn't matter. Daniel frowned. Of course it matters. That's your life, isn't it? The CEO sat down, pulling Sam onto his lap. It was my life, he said. But now my life is bigger than just business. It's about you three. It's about making sure kids like you don't suffer alone anymore. For the first time, Daniel didn't argue. He just stared at him, confused, maybe even a little moved. That night, as the boys drifted off to sleep, the CEO stood by the window of their small hotel room. The neon lights outside flickered. But his heart burned brighter than ever. He realized something: this wasn't just about Daniel, Jacob, and Sam anymore. This was about every child out there, forgotten by a world too busy chasing wealth. And in that moment, he knew his fight was only beginning. He whispered to himself, if I have to lose everything to give them a chance, then so be it. And for the first time in his life, the CEO felt free. The next morning, the CEO woke up with a fire in his chest. The threat from his board had been real, but instead of breaking him, it fueled him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or shareholder reports. He was thinking about a bigger mission. He drove to the hotel, but this time, he didn't just bring breakfast. He brought notebooks, pencils, and backpacks. When the boys saw him, Jacob's eyes widened. What's all this? Jacob asked, pulling out a pencil like it was treasure. School supplies, the CEO said simply. I thought maybe it's time you boys learned, not just survived. Sam clapped his hands with delight, hugging the backpack like a teddy bear. Even Daniel's expression shifted, cautious, but curious. But then Daniel frowned. School. They won't accept kids like us. No home, no parents, no records. The CEO crouched down so his eyes met Daniel's. Then I'll make a place where you belong. Not just for you, but for every child like you. Daniel tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean a foundation, the CEO said. A school, a shelter, a home, somewhere safe. Somewhere no one can throw you away again. For a moment, the boys were silent. They didn't know whether to believe him. Too many promises in their short lives had already been broken. But the CEO's eyes were steady. Strong. He wasn't saying this to feel good about himself. He was saying it because he meant it. Later that day, he made the first move. At his office, with cameras flashing and journalists crowding around, he stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. For years, I believed success was about money, power, and control. But last week, I met 3 boys who changed my life forever. They had nothing, no food, no shelter, no family. Yet they had more courage than most CEOs I know, including myself. The crowd stirred. Reporters scribbled furiously. Investors watching online clenched their jaws. He continued, "Today, I am announcing the launch of a foundation. A program dedicated to homeless children. It will provide housing, education, and care. And I will personally fund its beginning." Gasps rippled through the audience. One reporter shouted, "Sir, is this a business move or charity?" The CEO smiled faintly. "It's neither. It's humanity. And if that makes me less of a businessman, so be it." The press conference went viral. Social media exploded. Some praised him as a visionary with a heart. Others mocked him, calling it a midlife crisis or a publicity stunt. His board members were furious, but he didn't care. That evening, he returned to the hotel where the boys were waiting. He switched on the TV, showing them the news coverage. Sam pointed at the screen. "That's you." Jacob giggled.
You're famous!
Daniel stared silently at the image of the CEO standing at the podium, declaring war on indifference. Finally, he said, "You really did it." The CEO looked at him with a small smile. "I told you I don't break promises." For the first time, Daniel smiled, not a sarcastic smirk, not a guarded grin, but a real smile. It was faint, but it was there. That night, the CEO lay awake, thinking about the road ahead. The foundation was only an idea now, but it needed to become real. He knew the fight would be long, the critics louder, the sacrifices greater. But he also knew he wasn't doing it alone anymore. The next day he took the boys on a drive. Not to a restaurant or a hotel, but to an old, abandoned building on the edge of the city. "See this place?" he asked. Jacob wrinkled his nose. "It looks scary." Sam clung to his hand. "Is it haunted?" The CEO laughed softly. "Maybe. But soon it's going to be something else. This is where we'll start. This is where your home will be." The boys looked at him, stunned. Daniel shook his head. "You're really serious? Aren't you?" "Dead serious," the CEO said. "This won't be just a building. It'll be a school, a shelter, a chance for kids to dream again." And as he spoke, he could almost see it, the walls painted bright, classrooms full of laughter, beds where children slept safely at night, a playground where they could run without fear. It was no longer a dream, it was a promise. But promises had a price, and the CEO knew his enemies. Powerful investors, skeptical politicians, ruthless competitors would try to destroy it before it even began. He looked at the boys and thought, let them come. I've built billion-dollar empires before. Now I'll build something stronger. Hope. As the sun set behind the old building, the CEO put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "From now on," he said, his voice steady, "you're not just survivors. You're the reason everything changes." And for the first time, Daniel didn't doubt him. He just nodded. The battle was coming. But so was the future. The announcement of the foundation hit the city like a storm. Headlines were everywhere. Millionaire CEO shocks Wall Street. Launches foundation for homeless kids. Is this charity or madness? From boardroom to back alleys. CEO's new obsession. On social media, the debate raged. Some people applauded him, calling him a hero. Others accused him of faking compassion for publicity. The boys watched the news in silence, their eyes bouncing between the glowing screen and the man who had suddenly become the center of it all. Daniel finally asked, "Why are they so angry?" "You're helping us." The CEO leaned back in his chair, sighing. "Because people fear change. And when you decide to care about those they've ignored, it makes them uncomfortable." Jacob frowned. "But isn't helping kids a good thing?" "It is," the CEO said. "But good things don't always make money. And to some people, money matters more than lives." The next morning, he walked into the boardroom. The atmosphere was ice cold. 12 men and women sat around the polished table. Their faces hard. One of them, Mr. Clark, slammed a newspaper on the table. "Have you lost your mind?" he demanded. The market is laughing at us. Investors are panicking. Our stock dropped 3 points overnight. The CEO met his stare calmly. 3 points. And how many children went to bed hungry last night? This isn't about children, Clark snapped. This is business. You're gambling with billions. Another board member, a woman with sharp glasses, leaned forward. We can't support this foundation. It drains resources and damages our brand. Unless you reconsider, we may have no choice but to remove you. The CEO's jaw tightened. He'd built this empire from nothing, and now they wanted to strip it away because he dared to care. He stood, his voice firm. If all you care about is profit, then maybe I'm not the CEO you deserve. But I will not back down. The foundation stands. The room fell into tense silence. Some faces burned with anger, others with shock. For the first time, they saw a man who wasn't bargaining or compromising. He was declaring war. That night, the CEO returned to the hotel, exhausted but unbroken. The boys were waiting, their eyes full of questions. Sam rushed up first. Did they yell at you? The CEO chuckled softly. Yes. They did. Did you yell back? Jacob asked eagerly. I told them the truth. The CEO replied. And sometimes the truth is louder than yelling. Daniel, always cautious, asked the hardest question. What if they fire you? The CEO paused. Then they fire me. But they can't fire my promise to you. The boys looked at each other, unsure what to say. For kids who had been abandoned by everyone, hearing someone fight for them was like learning the sky could be a different color. The following days were a whirlwind. Talk shows invited analysts who argued over whether the CEO had lost his edge. Shareholders threatened lawsuits. Rivals saw weakness and circled like sharks. But something else began to happen. Letters poured in. Emails flooded his office. Not from billionaires or politicians, but from ordinary people. Teachers. Nurses. Single parents. Former homeless kids who had grown up and survived. Thank you for seeing us. One letter read. My son sleeps in his car. You give me hope. Another said. I was like those boys once. Don't stop. The CEO sat with the boys and read the letters out loud. Jacob's eyes lit up. Sam giggled at the kind words. And Daniel, for the first time, Daniel looked proud, as if the fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dignity. This is bigger than us, the CEO said, setting the letters down. We're not just building a shelter. We're starting a movement. But movements needed protection, and enemies were already preparing to strike harder. One evening, as they were leaving the old abandoned building where renovations had just begun, a black SUV pulled up. The tinted window rolled down. Inside sat a man in a crisp suit, his expression cold. You're making a mistake. The man said flatly. Foundations don't change the world. Money does. Walk away before you lose everything. The CEO stepped forward, shielding the boys behind him. Money builds walls. But humanity builds bridges. I'm not walking away. The man's lip curled into a smirk. Then prepare to be destroyed. The SUV rolled off, leaving behind a trail of exhaust and tension. The boys looked at the CEO nervously. Who was that? Sam whispered. An enemy of change, the CEO replied. But enemies only prove we're doing something right. He put his hands on their shoulders, steady and firm. This fight isn't just mine anymore. It's ours. And we're going to win. As the city lights flickered around them, the abandoned building loomed like a challenge. Broken windows. Crumbling walls. But in the CEO's mind, he already saw it glowing with life. He wasn't just fighting for 3 boys anymore. He was fighting for thousands who had been silenced, ignored, discarded. And no boardroom, no investor, no rival could stop what had already begun. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And once you hear the cries of the forgotten, you can't unhear them. The war had started. 2. The renovation began on a cold morning. Trucks pulled up with supplies. Workers carried lumber and tools into the abandoned building, and the sound of hammers echoed against the city streets. For the first time in years, the broken structure was waking up. The boys stood in awe. Jacob pointed at the scaffolding. It's really happening, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Sam ran around excitedly, kicking up dust and shouting,
This is going to be our place.
Our home. Daniel stayed quiet, watching carefully, his arms crossed. He had learned to wait before believing. But even he couldn't hide the small smile tugging at his lips. The CEO walked among the workers, shaking hands, thanking them. "We're not just building walls," he told them. "We're building hope." But hope had enemies. And those enemies weren't sleeping. By the second week, problems began. Supplies went missing overnight. Lumber vanished. Wires were cut. Windows that had been replaced were shattered again. One morning when the boys arrived, they found graffiti splattered across the walls in thick red paint. "CWOE. SICDWURCY." Sam's face went pale. Jacob clung to the CEO's arm. Daniel read the words silently, his jaw tightening. "Who did this?" Daniel asked. The CEO placed a hand on his shoulder. "Cowards who don't want to see change. But paint can't stop us," he called in cleaners. By noon, the graffiti was gone. But by evening, new damage appeared. It became a war of persistence. One side building, the other side trying to break. That night the boys sat around the CEO's hotel suite. The glow of the city poured through the tall windows, but their hearts were heavy. Sam asked, "What if they break everything before we finish?" The CEO leaned forward. "Then we rebuild. Every time they tear down, we stand taller. Because every nail we hammer, every wall we raise, proves we won't give up." Daniel studied him closely. "You really believe that? Don't you?" "Yes," the CEO said without hesitation. "Because I've already lived the other life. A life of silence, of pretending not to see suffering. That life was empty. This life has meaning." Jacob yawned and curled up on the couch. "As long as we're together, I think we'll be okay." But the war escalated. A week later, an inspector showed up at the site with a clipboard. "I'm shutting this project down," he declared. "No permits. Unsafe building. You'll have to halt construction immediately." The CEO frowned. "We have permits. Signed and approved." The inspector smirked. "Not anymore. Someone higher up says otherwise." The boys exchanged worried looks. "Who's higher up?" Daniel demanded. The inspector ignored him. "If you keep working, I'll have the city fine you into the ground." The CEO remained calm, but inside he burned. He knew this wasn't about safety. This was sabotage, from people with power, people afraid of change. That night, he made calls. He met with lawyers, he dug into records. And by morning, he had proof the rival businessman who had sent the black SUV was behind the shutdown. "This isn't about permits," the CEO told the boys as he spread the papers across the table. "It's about fear. Fear that if we succeed, others will follow. Fear that the world might change." Daniel clenched his fists. "So what do we do? Fight them?"
Yes.
The CEO said. "But not with fists. With truth. With persistence. With the one weapon they can't stand, compassion." The next day, he held a press conference right outside the half-renovated building. Cameras clicked. Reporters crowded in. The boys stood beside him, their clothes a little cleaner now, their eyes wide with both fear and pride. "Some people want to stop this project," the CEO said into the microphones. "They say it's unsafe. They say it's impossible. But look around. This building isn't just brick and steel. It's proof that no one is too far gone. It's proof that children living on the streets deserve better. And I promise you, no matter what it takes, we will finish what we started." The crowd erupted in cheers. Hashtags exploded online. Supporters rallied. Ordinary people began showing up with donations of food, clothes, and even volunteer labor. The tide was shifting. That night, the CEO and the boys sat in the half-finished building, eating pizza brought by volunteers. Sam giggled as cheese stretched from his mouth. Jacob tried to balance a soda can on his knee. Daniel for once looked relaxed. "This feels like family," Jacob said softly. The CEO glanced at him. His throat tightening. Family. A word he hadn't heard directed at him in years. Daniel leaned forward. "They're not going to stop, you know. Whoever's behind this, they'll keep pushing." "I know," the CEO replied. "But neither will we." The boys nodded. Outside, the city hummed. The skyscrapers glowed. And in the middle of it all, one building that had once been forgotten was now alive with workers, volunteers, and dreams. The fight was far from over. But something unstoppable had begun. Because when compassion takes root, no power on earth can rip it out. The next morning, the CEO received an invitation. It wasn't polite. It was a demand. A heavy cream-colored envelope slipped under his hotel room door, sealed with a wax stamp. "Dinner. Midnight. The Harbor Club. Come alone." The CEO read it twice. He knew immediately who it was from. That night, the Harbor Club glowed with golden lights. A fortress of wealth, it was the kind of place where millionaires and politicians struck deals behind velvet curtains. The CEO walked through the revolving doors, his reflection flickering in polished glass. Inside, he found the rival businessman sitting at a private table. The man wore a sharp suit, his watch gleaming like ice. A glass of wine rested in his hand. His smile was thin, dangerous. Finally, the man said, "The great savior himself. Sit." The CEO sat across from him. "You wanted to talk." The man leaned forward. "I want to save you the trouble. You're wasting your time with those street rats. No one cares about them. This city runs on money, power and silence. Not charity." The CEO didn't flinch. "They're not rats, they're children. Children this city abandoned." The man chuckled coldly. "Spare me the sermon. Here's the truth. You're making noise. Too much noise. You're threatening the system. And people like me, we are the system." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, the CEO saw a contract. Bold numbers typed in black ink. $10 million. The man said smoothly, "Walk away. Close the project. Disappear back into your ivory tower. No one will blame you. No one will ask questions." The CEO pushed the folder back. "No." The man's smile vanished. His eyes hardened. "Then understand this. You're not untouchable. Accidents happen. Businesses collapse. Reputations burn. Don't let those boys drag you down with them." The CEO stood, his voice steady. "Threats don't scare me. I've lived empty. I've lived alone. Nothing you can take from me is worse than the life I already had. But those boys. They've given me something you'll never have." The man sneered. "And what's that?" "Family." The CEO walked away, leaving the rival simmering in fury. The next day, the boys noticed something different. The CEO seemed heavier, his shoulders tense, but his eyes were sharper than ever. Daniel was the first to ask. "Something happened last night." "What was it?" The CEO looked at him, then at Sam and Jacob. He hesitated. He didn't want to burden them with danger. But the boys deserved the truth. "A man tried to buy me out," the CEO said quietly. "Tried to scare me into quitting." Sam gasped. Did you take the money?" The CEO knelt, looking Sam in the eyes. "No, Sam. And I never will. Because this project isn't about money, it's about you. About kids like you. About a future this city doesn't want to admit you deserve." Jacob hugged him tightly. "We knew you wouldn't leave us." But Daniel wasn't smiling. He leaned back, arms crossed. "If they're coming after you, then they're coming after us too." The CEO nodded. "That's why we have to be smart. Strong. And unafraid." By the third week, the project had turned into a movement. Local news stations followed the progress daily. Volunteers flooded in, bringing not just labor but hope. Mothers with children, students, even retired construction workers, all came to help. The boys were no longer just bystanders. They were becoming symbols. One afternoon, a reporter asked to interview them. The CEO hesitated. He wanted to protect them from the spotlight. But Daniel stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said. The camera rolled. Daniel stood in front of the half-renovated building, the sun casting long shadows behind him. "My name is Daniel," he said, his voice firm. "I've lived on the streets for years. I've seen kids freeze in the winter, starve in the summer, and disappear without anyone noticing. But now someone noticed, someone cared. And if this building can change even one life, then no threat, no fear, no amount of money should stop it." His words spread like fire. Clips of his speech trended online, hashtags exploded, donations doubled. For the first time, Daniel wasn't just surviving, he was leading. That evening, the four of them sat together inside the building, surrounded by beams and fresh plaster. Sam colored on a scrap of cardboard, Jacob hummed softly. Daniel stared at the flickering light of a work lamp. The CEO broke the silence. "You boys are braver than most grown men I know." Daniel glanced at him. "We didn't have a choice. We had to be." The CEO nodded slowly. "Neither do I anymore. This fight, it's not just about you three, it's about everyone like you. Every kid this city forgot." Sam looked up. "Does that mean we're heroes?" The CEO smiled faintly. "Yes, Sam. You are." But outside, shadows were moving. The rival businessman hadn't given up. He had money, power, and influence, and he was preparing his next move. The war was only beginning. 2. The CEO lay awake that night in his hotel suite, staring at the ceiling. The words of the rival echoed in his head: accidents happen. He thought about the boys sleeping just a few blocks away in the half-renovated shelter. He had chosen this path. He wouldn't turn back. But he also knew one thing. This battle might cost him more than money. It might cost him everything. And yet, for the first time in his life, that sacrifice felt worth it. The next morning, the CEO's phone buzzed relentlessly. Headlines flashed across every news channel, every site. Millionaire CEO uses homeless kids as PR stunt. Eyes the shelter project a cover, up for corruption. Revel sources claim CEO diverting funds. The rival had moved his pieces. Lies, carefully planted stories, and rumors spread like wildfire. The internet exploded with debates. Some believed in the shelter project. Others accused the CEO of using the boys as pawns for fame. The CEO sat in silence, scrolling through the headlines. His stomach twisted. For a man who once ruled boardrooms, whose every deal was airtight, this kind of public attack hit harder than he expected. The boys noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" Jacob asked, tugging at his sleeve. The CEO forced a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about." But Daniel wasn't convinced. He snatched the phone from the CEO's hand and scanned the headlines. His face hardened. "They're lying." Daniel spat. "They're trying to destroy you." The CEO exhaled heavily. "Not just me. They're trying to destroy us." The Sam's eyes welled. "Does this mean the shelter it's over?" The CEO shook his head. "No, it means we have to fight harder." Poo-foo. That afternoon, when the workers gathered at the construction site, they looked uncertain. Whispers moved through the crowd. Questions, doubts, fears. The CEO climbed onto a stack of wooden beams. His voice carried across the room. "I know what you've read. I know what's being said. That I'm using this project for attention, for profit, for my own gain. But let me tell you something. There is no profit in this. There's no contract, no investors, no benefit for me. The only benefit is for those boys and kids like them. If anyone here thinks I'm in this for myself, walk away now." The room fell silent. No one moved. Then one of the older workers, a man with weathered hands and tired eyes, stepped forward. "My brother died on the streets. If you're doing this for these kids, then I don't care what the papers say. I'm staying." Others murmured agreement. The doubt faded. The hammers swung again. But the rival didn't stop. That night, on live television, the rival businessman appeared for an interview. He wore his perfect smile, his voice dripping with false concern. "I admire the CEO's generosity," he said smoothly. "But I must question his methods. Throwing money at a few street kids won't solve poverty, and if he truly wanted to help, why now? Why not years ago? Unless, of course, this is about image. About distraction. About hiding failures in his own company." The interviewer nodded, feeding the flames. "So you believe it's a publicity stunt?" The rival smiled wider. "I believe the public deserves the truth." The CEO watched the interview from the half-built shelter, his fists clenched. Daniel sat beside him, anger burning in his eyes. "You can't let him win," Daniel said. The CEO turned to him. "Then help me. Help me show them the truth." Daniel tilted his head. "How?" The CEO stood, a new determination in his voice. "We don't fight lies with more lies. We fight them with the one thing they can't touch, your story." The next day, a press conference was called. Cameras lined the street outside the construction site. Reporters shouted, flashing lights lit up the unfinished walls, and microphones crowded the podium. The CEO stepped up first. "You've heard the rumors, the accusations. You've been told I'm using these children as props, that this project is fake. Well, instead of me talking, I want you to hear from the people this is really about." He stepped aside. Daniel walked to the podium. His hands shook, but his eyes were steel. Sam and Jacob stood behind him, their small figures dwarfed by the crowd. "My name is Daniel," he began, his voice echoing through the microphones. "For years, I slept in alleys. I ate from dumpsters. I watched friends die on the streets while the world walked past. No cameras, no interviews, no one cared. But then someone did. He didn't just give me food, he didn't just give me money, he gave me hope. This building behind me, it isn't just bricks. It's proof that we matter. That kids like me deserve to live to dream, to be seen. He paused, his voice breaking. If you think this is a publicity stunt, then come spend one night out there, where I lived. See if you survive. See if you can sleep without fear, without hunger. Then tell me this doesn't matter. The silence afterward was thunderous. Reporters lowered their cameras. Some wiped their eyes. The video streamed online, gathering millions of views within hours. Hashtags erupted again, but this time not in doubt. In support. To that evening, donations poured in faster than ever. Celebrities, athletes, even politicians tweeted about the project. Volunteers doubled overnight. The shelter became a beacon of hope across the city. The CEO looked at the boys, pride swelling in his chest. You just changed everything, he said softly. Sam grinned. Does that mean we won? But Daniel shook his head.
Not yet.
He won't stop. He's too powerful. Too angry. The CEO nodded grimly. And that's why we can't stop either. Too later that night, the rival sat alone in his penthouse office, watching Daniel's speech on repeat. His jaw tightened. His glass of whiskey trembling in his hand. They're winning the people, he muttered. But the people don't run this city. I do. He picked up his phone. Dialing a number. It's time. Do whatever it takes. Shut them down. Outside, the city lights glowed, unaware of the storm about to break. The morning after Daniel's speech, the CEO woke to a heavy knock on his door. It wasn't the boys, or the construction workers, or a reporter. It was three men in dark suits holding folders. Mr. Carter. One of them asked. Yes. You've been served. The CEO froze. He opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the words, lawsuit, misuse of funds, fraud investigation, court summons. The rival had struck again, this time not with rumors, but with the law. By afternoon the news broke. Shelter project under federal scrutiny. CEO faces lawsuit. Millions at stake. Homeless boys at center of legal storm. The boys saw it on television. Sam's face crumpled. They're shutting us down, aren't they? The CEO knelt in front of him. Listen to me, Sam. They can file papers, they can spread lies. They can try to bury us under their money and lawyers. But the truth doesn't change. We're not stopping. Daniel's fists clenched. Then we fight. The fight, however, wasn't easy. Courtrooms replaced boardrooms. Reporters swarmed outside. Every word, every move was dissected. The rival's lawyers painted the CEO as a manipulator, a man desperate for redemption after years of corporate greed. They showed pictures of his luxury home, his cars, his old business scandals. Why now? They demanded in front of cameras. Why only after meeting three boys? This is a smokescreen. A rich man's attempt to cleanse his conscience while still living like a king. The CEO sat quietly through it all, his jaw tight. But then, during one hearing, Daniel stood up in the courtroom. The judge silenced him at first, but Daniel's voice was sharp, unshakable. Why does it matter why he's helping? What matters is that he is. You sit here in suits, arguing about his motives, while kids are dying on the street tonight. You want to stop him? Fine. But then what's your plan? Who's gonna save us? You, him. Daniel pointed to the rival, his eyes blazing. No. He's never set foot on those streets. He doesn't know hunger. He doesn't know fear. He doesn't know us. But Mr. Carter does now. And that's enough for me. The courtroom fell into silence. The judge leaned forward. Order, sit down. But the damage was done. The rival's smug smile faltered. Outside, cameras caught Daniel's words. The clip went viral again, spreading faster than any headline. Millions commented. Millions shared. Hashtags like Faye let him build and A Shelter for Hope trended across the country. But the rival wasn't finished. That night, an anonymous email leaked to the press. Documents, old photos, and details from the CEO's past. Not illegal things, but embarrassing ones. Stories of ruthless business tactics. Companies he had crushed, workers laid off by his decisions. Headlines screamed, hypocrisy. CEO once closed factories, now claims to care for the poor. The boys saw it too. Jacob looked at him with wide, hurt eyes. Is it true? Did you really hurt people before? The CEO sighed, sinking into his chair. Yes, I did. I was cold. I only cared about winning, about money. I thought that was the only way to live. But that man, the man I was, is not who I am now. Meeting you changed that. Daniel crossed his arms, staring at him. Then prove it. Don't just say it. Keep building. Keep fighting. Don't let your past decide your future. The CEO met his gaze. A small smile touched his lips. Spoken like someone who knows about second chances. 2. Construction continued, though slower now. Permits were delayed. Inspections were suddenly stricter. Supplies were mysteriously held back. Every step forward came with 2 obstacles. The rivals' power reached deep into the system. One evening, after the workers left, the CEO found the boys sitting in the half-built shelter. Sam was drawing on a scrap of wood. A picture of a big house with dozens of kids smiling. "This is what it's gonna look like," Sam said proudly. "When it's done." The CEO looked at the drawing, his throat tightening. "It's beautiful. But what if they stop us?" Jacob whispered. "What if we never finish?" The CEO put an arm around him. "Then we start again, and again, and again, until it's built. Because the only way we lose is if we give up." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we don't give up." The rival, however, was growing desperate. He had expected the lawsuit and the smear campaign to bury them. Instead, public support only grew. Donations doubled. Volunteers flooded the site. Even politicians began praising the project. One night, in his glass office overlooking the city, the rival slammed his fist on the desk. "If the law won't stop him, then fear will." He picked up the phone. His voice was ice. "Send a message. Make him back down. Do whatever it takes." 2 nights later, as the CEO walked the boys back to his car after another long day at the site, a black SUV slowed at the corner, windows tinted, engine rumbling. The CEO's instincts flared. He pulled the boys closer. The SUV rolled down its window. A man leaned out. His voice was sharp, cold. "Stop the shelter. Or next time, it won't just be a warning." The SUV sped away, tires screeching, leaving only silence and the boys' terrified faces behind. Daniel clenched his fists, shaking with rage. "He's trying to scare us." The CEO swallowed hard. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "Then we show him. We don't scare easy." He looked at the boys, at their trembling yet determined eyes. The battle had grown darker. More dangerous. But his resolve had never been stronger. The rival had crossed a line. And now, it wasn't just about building a shelter. It was about survival. The black SUV's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. For days, the boys walked nervously, glancing over their shoulders. Even the workers felt the tension. Some whispered about quitting. But the CEO stood firm. "No matter what happens, we finish this," he told them. His voice was iron. His eyes burned with purpose. Still, the rival's shadow stretched longer. Permits were delayed again. Supplies mysteriously vanished. And one night, disaster struck. It was nearly midnight when the CEO got the call. The shelter site was on fire. He rushed through the streets, the boys in the car with him. Smoke billowed into the night sky, flames devouring the half-built structure. Fire trucks wailed, workers screamed, and volunteers stood helplessly, tears streaming down their faces. Sam buried his face in his hands. "It's gone, it's all gone." The CEO jumped out of the car, heart hammering. The rival's message was clear. This wasn't just sabotage. This was war. As he stood staring at the blaze, he felt Daniel's hand on his arm. The boy's voice was calm but steady. "They can burn wood and walls. But they can't burn us. They can't burn hope." The CEO turned to him, stunned by the strength in his words. Daniel wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a leader. By dawn, the fire was out. The shelter was nothing but ashes and twisted beams. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. The rival's allies celebrated in silence. But what no one expected happened next. One by one, people from the city began arriving at the site. Not workers, not officials, ordinary people. Families. Teachers. College students. Homeless kids. Retired veterans. They carried hammers, nails, food, blankets. A woman stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "You may have lost the building. But you didn't lose us. We'll build it again. Together." Another man shouted. "For every wall they knock down, we'll raise 2 more." The crowd roared in agreement. The CEO stood in the ashes, overwhelmed. He had spent his life commanding boardrooms, but he had never seen power like this, power born not from money, but from unity. Jacob tugged at his sleeve. "See, we're not alone anymore." Tears stung the CEO's eyes. For the first time, he realized. This wasn't his fight anymore. It was everyone's. 2 days turned into weeks. Out of the ashes, a miracle rose. The shelter grew faster than before, built by hundreds of hands, fueled by donations pouring in from across the nation. Reporters covered the story daily. Headlines shifted. From fire to hope. Shelter project inspires America. Community rises against corruption. Homeless boys lead a movement. Even the rival couldn't stop it. His threats, his sabotage, his power, all crumbled under the weight of a city united. To the day the shelter finally opened, sunlight broke through the clouds. A ribbon stretched across the entrance. Cameras flashed. Crowds cheered. The CEO stood at the podium, the three boys at his side. His voice carried not just through the speakers, but through hearts. I once thought I had everything, he said. Power. Success. But the truth is, I had nothing, because I had no purpose. Then one night, I met three boys who showed me what real wealth is. Not in dollars, not in buildings, but in people, in love, in hope. This shelter isn't mine, it's yours, it's ours, and it's only the beginning. The crowd erupted in applause. Sam cut the ribbon with oversized scissors. Jacob laughed, clapping his hands. Daniel smiled, a rare, genuine smile, as he whispered, "We did it." The CEO looked at him. "No, Daniel. You did it. You gave me a second chance, and because of you, thousands more will have theirs." Falls that night, the shelter's halls glowed with light. Dozens of kids found warm beds. Families sat down to hot meals. Laughter echoed where once there had only been silence. The CEO walked through it all, his heart full. For the first time in his life, he wasn't lonely. For the first time, he wasn't just a man with wealth. He was a man with meaning. Outside, Daniel, Sam, and Jacob sat on the steps, watching the stars. The CEO joined them. "Remember that night I first saw you?" he asked softly. Sam grinned. "You looked scared." Jacob giggled. "And you were wearing that fancy coat." Daniel nodded. "And you changed everything." The CEO shook his head. "No, boys. You changed everything." They sat there in silence, four souls bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Hope reborn from ashes. And as the city lights flickered in the distance, the CEO realized that night on the street hadn't been an accident. It had been destiny. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. And I'd love to hear from you. What did you learn from this journey? Have you ever had a moment in your life that changed you forever? Just like it did for our CEO tonight. Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else. Thank you so much for giving us your precious time. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired,